Everyone in Willow Creek knew Clara Dawson, and not because she tried to be known. In a town that measured women by how neatly they fit into sundresses and diner booths, Clara had always taken up more space than people thought she should. She'd grown up hearing the comments disguised as concern, the laughter that followed her down school hallways, the polite smiles that never quite reached anyone's eyes. By 28, she had mastered the art of folding into herself, shoulders rounded, voice softened, dreams downsized. If she couldn't shrink her body, she would at least shrink her presence. When her aunt passed away and left her the small farmhouse at the edge of town, Clara saw it as an escape. The house sat beside open pastureland, where fences stretched toward the horizon and the wind carried the scent of hay and sun-warmed earth. It was quiet there, far enough from Main Street that gossip took longer to arrive. She moved in with little fanfare, telling herself she preferred it that way. The trouble started 3 days later when her old pickup truck sank into a patch of stubborn mud near the property line. She pressed the gas, but the tires only spun deeper, splattering dirt along the sides. Frustration burned in her chest. Of course. Even the ground refused to hold her up. That was when she saw him walking across the neighboring field. Luke Callahan owned the largest ranch in Willow Creek. He moved with the steady confidence of someone used to hard work, boots sinking into the earth without hesitation. He stopped a few feet from her window, tipped his hat once, and studied the situation. "You might want to just sit down," he said in a calm, even tone. The words hit her like a slap. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Sit down. As if she hadn't spent her entire life being told to make herself smaller, quieter, less visible. Before she could fire back, he crouched near the front of the truck. "I'll hook the chain underneath. Don't want you slipping when it pulls free." Underneath. He wasn't looking at her body. He was examining the axle, the angle of the tires, the safest place to secure the chain. His focus was practical, not judgmental. Clara swallowed, embarrassed by how quickly she had assumed the worst. She watched as he worked with efficient strength, mud staining his gloves. When he finally signaled for her to try again, the truck jerked forward and rolled onto solid ground. Relief flooded through her, but so did something unfamiliar. Maybe, just maybe, not every glance carried criticism. And maybe she had been bracing for impact so long that she no longer knew what kindness looked like when it stood right in front of her. Over the next few weeks, Luke became a constant presence on Clara's land, though he never announced himself or made a spectacle of it. He appeared with tools when a fence post leaned too far, leaving fresh eggs at her doorstep without explanation, or showing up in the afternoon sun to check irrigation lines that Clara had been too busy, or too hesitant, to repair herself. At first, she tried to ignore him, pretending she didn't notice the careful way he measured each fence panel, the patience in his movements, the quiet encouragement in his voice. But ignoring him was impossible. He moved through her life like sunlight slipping through the cracks in her walls, unyielding yet gentle, and Clara found herself waiting for the sound of his boots on the porch. One afternoon, a broken beam in the barn demanded attention. Clara, stubborn as ever, insisted on climbing the ladder herself despite Luke's cautious warnings. "I've got this," she said, gripping the wood with trembling hands. He gave her a level glance, silent, knowing the stubborn streak she carried was as much a part of her as her size, her laughter, her history of shrinking. She climbed higher, heart pounding in rhythm with each creaking plank, until the wood beneath her protested with a sharp snap. Before she could fall, strong hands steadied her. Luke's grip was firm but careful, unwavering, and the warmth of it sent a shiver through her she didn't understand. "Just sit down," he said softly, his voice stripped of teasing or impatience. Concern lingered in the words, replacing the judgment she had expected all her life. She looked up at him, startled, her chest tight. His eyes met hers, steady and patient, and for a moment, all the whispers, all the stares, all the years of being told she was too much fell away. "You don't think I'm too much?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Luke frowned, genuinely confused. "Too much what?" he asked, his tone gentle. Too big. Too heavy. Too. Clara, he interrupted, his voice carrying a weight she couldn't resist. You're exactly what you are. That's enough. Her breath caught, and tears blurred the edges of her vision. She had spent decades imagining judgment in every glance, yet here he was, seeing her without criticism, without whispers, without conditions. Underneath her walls of defense, something fragile began to shift. For the first time, she felt a sliver of trust, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her, truly see her, and not flinch. In that moment, the world didn't feel so heavy, and Clara realized that perhaps strength wasn't measured by size, but by the courage to let someone hold you steady when you most needed it. Rumors started almost immediately after Clara began spending more time around Luke. Willow Creek was a small town, and news traveled faster than the wind through the open pastures. By the time Clara stopped at the general store for groceries, she could feel the weight of curious stares and hear the faint whispers behind her back. "What's he doing with her?" someone muttered as she passed. "He could have anyone," another said, a smirk tugging at the corners of their mouth. "She's not exactly rancher wife material," came a third, delivered as if it were a fact carved in stone. Clara stiffened but kept moving, pretending she hadn't heard a single word. She'd learned long ago that listening to gossip only made the voice inside her head louder, the one that told her she didn't belong anywhere. That night, she packed a bag, telling herself she would leave before she embarrassed him, or worse, embarrassed herself. She could hear the imagined snickers and see the judgmental glances replaying in her mind, like a cruel film she could not turn off. She climbed into her truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and shame. She would leave Willow Creek, find some place anonymous, far from the small town and its endless opinions. Before she could start the engine, she felt a presence beside her. Luke leaned casually against the truck, the lines of his face softened by the evening light, eyes calm but penetrating. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice steady, not accusatory, not surprised. Clara hesitated, biting the inside of her cheek. "You don't need this," she said finally, her words tumbling out. "The whispers, the looks. I know what they're saying." Her hands shook, and she avoided his gaze, afraid that he would see how deeply the words had cut into her. "And?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, as though puzzled by the notion that she should care what anyone else thought. "It'll ruin things for you," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Luke stepped closer, closing the distance without pressure. "Clara," he said gently, "I've wrestled bulls twice my size. You think small-town gossip scares me?" His words carried a confidence that made her chest ache in an unfamiliar way, a mixture of relief and disbelief. "You don't understand," she murmured, almost to herself. "No," he said, shaking his head, "I understand perfectly." He paused, letting his eyes meet hers. "The only weight I see you carrying is everyone else's opinion. Let someone stand beside you instead of running ahead or hiding behind it all." Her throat tightened, and for the first time in her life, Clara felt that maybe she didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders alone. Maybe someone could see her, accept her, and choose to stay, no matter what anyone else thought. The day of the town festival arrived, and Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had imagined this moment countless times, the crowded streets, the stares, the murmurs, but now that it was real, her nerves threatened to overwhelm her. She hesitated at the edge of the festival grounds, watching children dart past with cotton candy, couples laughing under string lights, and neighbors greeting each other with warm familiarity. Every glance felt like a judgment, every smile seemed layered with hidden meaning. For a moment, she thought she wouldn't make it through the evening. Then she saw him. Luke stood at the edge of the crowd, his boots dusted with the festival dirt, a small, easy smile on his face. When their eyes met, he lifted his hand, beckoning her forward. Her heart pounded, a mixture of relief and apprehension. She wanted to run, to hide, to shrink herself until she disappeared, but something in his steady gaze held her in place. "Dance with me tonight," he said, his voice low, carrying just enough warmth to make her pulse quicken. "I don't dance," she replied, instinctively backing away. Then just sit down, he said, a teasing glint in his eyes. Clara frowned but couldn't help a small laugh. Where? Next to me, he said simply, offering his hand again. There was no pressure, only patience. She hesitated, then allowed herself to be led to a quiet spot near the center of the festival, away from the prying eyes, yet close enough to feel part of the celebration. As the music began, Luke pulled her gently into the open, not as a spectacle, not to show her off, but as a choice. He moved with careful consideration, matching her steps, guiding her through the rhythm. The crowd blurred into a haze of color and sound, and for the first time, Clara noticed the absence of judgment. No one's whispers could touch her here. She felt seen, chosen, and, remarkably, safe. When the song ended, they stayed close, boots kicking up dust into golden light, the air thick with the scent of hay and evening warmth. Later, perched on the tailgate of Luke's truck, she finally asked the question that had been lingering since that first day. What did you mean when you said you'd hook the chain underneath? Luke smiled, eyes reflecting the string lights above. Every strong thing has support underneath. That's what keeps it steady. Sometimes people just forget to check. Clara leaned against him, the tension of years melting away. She had spent so long thinking she was too much, too big, too heavy for anyone to truly accept. But now, with Luke beside her, she realized the truth. Underneath the fear, beneath the doubts, she was strong enough, and this time, she didn't have to face the world alone. She stayed. She belonged. And for the first time in her life, she felt enough.